Okay, morning, Coach Wilford. Just thought we'd do a sort of informal sort of defensive chat with some questions, and if we enjoy it, we'll sort of repeat it again. So, I saw your talk on the sort of, I think it was the BAFCA sort of chat. Oh, it was the convention, the online convention. And one of the things that I was dying to ask, but I never. So, because you do a lot of sort of cover zero and a lot of pressures, do you do? I mean, it's called blitz peel or flare control. Do you do that? Have you got any hints for people that use that?
Yeah, we do a little bit of that, to be fair. We do it to protect ourselves a lot of the time. Obviously, if you're going to rush however many, seven, it depends. Assuming there's four receivers out, if you're going to rush seven, then you've got to account for the back somehow. We might say, an inside linebacker on one side of the formation is responsible for him. And then if he comes out the other side, then that end needs to blitz peel or the outside backer needs to blitz peel. In terms of kind of technique, or I think it's the key thing is not to be too aggressive in the rush. We kind of fell to that a little bit at UE away last year, where we played a lot of zero and we tried to be clever with how we were covering the back, and then they ran middle screen on us, and the All American took it 75 yards.
All right.
So,
Yeah.
um, but no, I think not to be too aggressive in the rush and make sure that the guy you're asking to blitz peel is capable of that. You don't want a bigger five tech kind of guy that can't move covering a scat back or a quick running back. So maybe use an outside backer or put an inside backer off the edge if they're more athletic, or just make sure. And then I think maybe the other thing as well, we don't necessarily use our defensive ends like that because we're 3-4, so it'd more be our outside linebacker. Um, and so it would more fit the skills profile of what we ask our guys to do. So our Sam, we ask him to rush a lot, but we ask him to do a lot of coverage. We wouldn't necessarily ask one of our interior guys that doesn't spend any time in practice on coverage to do a skill like that.
Okay, cool. So, um, yeah, that's the thing that I always worry. It takes away the sort of aggressiveness of the blitz a little bit because they're in two minds on what to do. But I presume it still ties up another blocker, so it frees up somebody else.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think if you've got film on your opponent and you see they don't send the back out, then you maybe could be a little bit more aggressive with it. We Britball teams don't often send the back out, and when they do, it's rare that they throw it. Certainly in the teams that we play. But like you say, you still have to account for it. So, but yeah, if they want to stay in and protect, then they want to add to the protection because we may be sending a lot, and so they feel we're almost dictating to them at that point, and they feel that they need the extra numbers in protection. And yeah, we'll send an extra one too because in theory we should always have one more.
Yeah.
Not including the quarterback.
Okay. And then do you talk to the blitzers about sort of taking an outside shade, or like you just like let them sort of rip and they just have to turn and run with the back if it goes out?
Yeah, we would. Yeah, more of a turn and run. I suppose we wouldn't let them take an inside move. We kind of coach it so you don't take an inside move, obviously, because you can't. And it depends what the protection is. If it's like full slide away from you and the guy's free, then that's not too bad. You can just rush to the back, and if he comes towards you, just I use the phrase blitz the back, and all I mean by that is just attack the running back in the protection. If he comes to block you, we feel we should be winning that matchup. A running back versus a linebacker or a D end in pass pro, that we think the defensive guy should win that. But you've got to attack him. You can't just run by him because then you've got the screen or you've got no ability to play that blitz peel or whatever you call it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's perfect. Great. It's thanks for the details. Sometimes you sort of ask guest coaches that, and they're like, oh, you just rush, and it's like, but there's more detail in the in that. Fantastic. So
Yeah.
moving on to something else, sort of tackling time in practice. Sort of how much time do you put for tackling in each practice?
So every practice we get 16 minutes. So we practice twice in the week. We don't practice on weekends, and our sessions are 2 hours long. So we get effectively 32 minutes a week in tackling time. We are big kind of proponents of the Richie Gray system and the advanced tackling stuff and the 5 fights. So we kind of break it down based on, what we initially at the start of the year, we'll start to work all of the kind of fights. And I think the tracking element takes up most of our practice time. And that's what we spend the vast majority of our time on, making sure the guys know the angle that they need to pursue and also their leverage in relation to their responsibility, whether they're a forced offender or whether they're a spilled offender in which, hit to be attacking. Um, but we'll work some of the connect stuff and the prepare and the finish and that kind of thing. But on a normal week, if we've got, let's say we've just played a game on the Sunday and then we're going to play another game on the next Saturday or whatever, kind of back-to-back games. Our Tuesdays are our kind of physical, heavy live practice. So we might do a thigh and roll tackle against a bag or step over for 8 minutes, and then second period we might do some sort of goal line tackle where we're doing a profile tackle, working more of a near pec to near pec and above the waist. So we do tackle below the waist. I mean, we are live, as we said, on Tuesdays. We try not to do too much of it in the on the practice side of it. We kind of leave it for the scrimmage periods, I suppose. We'll tackle bags as often as we can rather than tackling bodies just to protect our guys. But there's obviously merit to tackling players more so because that's what you're going to be tackling on the game day. So you better be used to it. And but yeah, I think just to kind of summarize, answer your question, yeah, we get 32 minutes a week. We are, I mean, if anyone wants to come watch us practice, we are very, very fast tempo. Within that, we'll be running normally, depending on the drill, we'll normally either have 2 or 3 separate kind of drills happening at the same time, either by positional or we may do it by kind of responsibility. So we may have outside linebackers and DBs together working maybe some sort of outside in portion of the track. And then we might have the D line and the inside backers working the spill portion of it. And so we just try and get through reps as fast as we can because obviously time is the one thing that we're all short on and we all want more of. So you just have to be 100%, like 100 mile an hour. And if you get mistakes, then don't stop the drill, let it happen, let it keep going, don't compromise someone else's reps. We're lucky that we've got a good amount of numbers, and even with 2 or 3 drills set up, we've probably got, I don't know, 3 or 4 kind of reps before that player might go again. And that, even if it's just one coaching point, you normally have enough time just to kind of emphasize the key points. And we do that all the time. I'm continually saying, run your feet 3 feet and 3 feet in the ground, or clamp, depending on the drill, or near hip or whatever it is. So you just try and emphasize the buzzwords all the time to them. So it kind of near foot, near shoulder is a massive one. And kind of funny story, one of the guys that played D-line for me is going to come back and coach for us this year. Great kid called Bommy. I think earlier in the season, it was, I'm trying to remember the game now. I think it was Chicago versus Tampa. And Kyle Fuller, the cornerback from the Bears, hit that guy on the crosser, forced a fumble, and the Bucks actually beat the Bears, even with, the Bears beat the Bucks with Nick Foles at quarterback. And he retweeted it on Twitter and he tagged me and he said, so this near foot, near shoulder stuff actually works then. Coach had a point with it. And it's just like, obviously if I've mentioned it, I must have mentioned it a lot for him to remember that. And so it's just kind of emphasizing those key coaching points all the time. Yeah. So.
And it never ceases to amaze me when you have something that you think you've said a million times, and then you ask them, "What is it we say?" And they're like, "I'm not sure what we say." Yeah, just keep repeating it. Just keep sending that message to get the near foot, near shoulder. And
Yeah.
I mean, eventually the sort of penny drops, and you get, oh, that's a lot stronger position to be in there. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. So 32 minutes. I mean, that's a good portion of the practice time, but obviously it's very important. Uh,
Yeah, we tend to do, we'll have 16 minutes on that. We'll have 16 minutes on individual drills. We'll have sometimes another 16, we tend to have another 16 minutes for kind of a unit aspect, whether that will be um, block shed, takeaways, or if it's early in the year, we may use it for install time, or again, if it's late in the year, we use it for scout. So, but yeah, that's kind of, blocking and tackling is football, isn't it? So the more time we can spend on it, then the better.
exactly. That perfectly takes me on to another question. So as far as the sort of scout periods, what do you do? Do you have cards drawn up, and do you talk through it?
Yeah, so I mean, what we'll do normally is we'll have a 16-minute period where we'll do offense, obviously, or scout for defense, and then vice versa. Um, I will normally run, so it kind of it does change, but normally it might be that our offense will work. So our offensive ones will do their work against the defense. A lot of the time, I'll run the defensive scout just because I've watched the film and I know what it is. I mean, they'll always have some sort of prep for me, whether that will be cards printed out or a huddle install that's been printed off onto A4, or a lot of the time, even just like a huddle screenshot on the phone. Like I said, we're lucky that we got quite good numbers. So we'll normally use twos and threes on defense. We'll match the kind of profile with what we ask our guys to do with what they ask their guys to do. And then, yeah, we just get people lined up, and then there's two or three of us on defense that will just help out. And, one person may kind of assist the secondary and just kind of say, right, this is the coverage here, or these are the coverages they like to run. Just switch it up between this and this. I normally look after the front because I think that's probably the most important thing for the run game, just to see, making sure people are in the right spot. So yeah, we use cards, and then vice versa when it comes to the other side of it. I've normally got some cards prepped. I'll normally have, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 runs, probably normally 3 or 4 runs, and then 2 or 3 passes. And then if they run any kind of weird stuff like a trick play or something that we don't see very often, that whether it's a motion or a shift or a run or a trick play, then I'll make sure we mix that in as well. And again, that's hard with time because you've got with us, we're not asking our ones to take part in that, the offensive ones to take part in that period. So generally, you've got more inexperienced guys. So normally you'll have like a couple of offensive coaches and myself will just run the scout at the start maybe and say, look, this is the kind of base formation. These are the cards. Please run it, and then I'll call the defense. But we've had some really good work, and something we did at the end of last year. Yeah, it was the end of last year now. We actually started to get the twos and threes right at the end of the year in a separate scout classroom for kind of 20 minutes.
Okay.
I think it's a balance. Like, it definitely helped us to prepare for scout, but then also it's juggling that with they're going to miss maybe install time or valuable scout time of their own side of the ball. But it's what helps you most on game day. And if we're playing a semi-final, our threes are not going to get many reps unless we happen to be up big or there's a lot of injuries. So, but scouts are always challenging because I mean I always get like frustrated in that period because you've got guys that have never played before, often rookies, and they've got to learn one kind of playbook or one system, and then all of a sudden now you're teaching something else, and like it happens to our defensive guys quite a lot. Actually, I'll say to the defensive guys, right, this is your job here, and then the play will happen, and they'll do something in coverage, and I'll say, well, what did you do there? And they said, well, I did this, and I said, okay, if we were an R scheme, that's great. You do exactly what I want, but they don't do that. So can you do this, please? And then they're like, oh, right. So why don't they do that? And it's like, right, I've got an 8-minute period. I'd love to chat to you about this, but I'll tell you in a second. Just work the next rep, and we'll fight. Because time is the one thing that we struggle with.
It's nice to hear that you have the same challenges that everybody else does. So yeah, with the why don't we line up like this? Well, because
Yeah,
they don't.
yeah, and a lot of the time, because you can see what an opponent runs on film, but you don't know the why, and you don't and so you'll get those questions from your players, and a lot of time you just say, look, I don't know why they run it like this,
Yeah,
and it a lot of the time it makes perfect sense and it's fundamentally sound and everything like that, and our guys think, well, we don't do it that way, so it can't be right, and obviously that's not the case. There's more than one way to do it,
yeah.
but
Yeah, you almost don't want to stifle that sort of questioning and thinking, but it's like this is the scout period. You almost
exactly.
want you to switch off. So you've got the offense running your scout, do you run the same play several times in a row, or will you do alternate plays? Or?
No, we won't run the same play because I try to get quite specific. The more film I watch and the better prepared I am, the better I'll have an idea of when it's going to be run. When we're at our best, we'll have a down and distance out, and I can match the scout to the down and distance. But generally, we won't run a play back to back. If the offense don't quite rep it how I want it repped, if someone makes an assignment error, then we'll come back to it. But it depends what they run a lot of. Like, I don't know. I always go to the UE example because we spend the most time preparing for them because they're the best team that we play in our division. Like what they do a lot of, we need to work a lot of, and then what maybe do less, then we can spend less time on it. So if they want to run like push their kind of inside run call, 20, 30 times a game with different tags, then I need at least 3 or 4 reps, in 8 minutes, if not more, of that run play with tags. But yeah, we tend not to go back to back. The other thing we have done actually, which I thought I just didn't throw in there, is we sometimes use certain personnel to match certain people. So obviously we kind of touched on cover zero earlier. For us, a lot of that will be based on matchup. So we've obviously got DBs with different skill sets, whether that's quickness or speed or whatever. And so we'll ask our guys to match up with opposing receivers based on their profile and how well we know them and their skill set. So if we've got, an All-American number 1 receiver like the tight end that you had last year, then yeah, we're going to have to match him up. Either we're going to have to double team him, or we're probably going to use Eddie, who's our kind of GB corner, to play him. But then equally, you might have a really tall receiver that we want a certain corner to cover. We might have a really kind of quick receiver that works in the slot. And so what we try to do with that is we try to keep the same 4 receivers or the same 4 kind of people in the offense as personnel, and then we move them around. And so we can say, right, check 82's over here, or 6 is there, or and then one other thing on that, what we have done before is when Swansea played us and they had Huxtable running the offense at quarterback. Like we used Elliot Walters as a scout running back or to play QB because, like, as good as a thrower as he was, I don't think our guys realised how fast he was. And people say it on like the broadcast on the NFL, talking about the Chiefs all the time, until you actually get there on the field. Romo says it, like, you don't realise how fast they are. And I think we had that explosion this year at home. We were playing Hearts, and Gabriel was the running back, and Guy is just an absolute monster. Like watching the UE film, and he's like, running over all American safeties and, you know, running away from people. Like, we made a serious commitment to stop him, and fortunately it worked. I think we must have held him under like 20 yards for the game, or maybe not actually, because he got so first play of the game, just an easy inside run. We bottle it up. Our forced defender just kind of takes two couple of steps inside, being a little bit too aggressive, and he gets out on the edge and runs for 30 yards. And it's like, you know, yes, this guy is as quick as, you know, as that. So if we can use certain offensive personnel that we have in practice, that match up with the skill profile of our opponent, then, you know, that's going to help us on the weekend.
Yeah, that's great. So, like, being really creative to make sure you put your defensive players in a good position. Yeah, I mean, sometimes if they've got a tall receiver and you don't have one, you can't do that. But you can sort of mix and match and sort of make sure that, yeah, like you say, you have a quick wide receiver at quarterback if you need to make sure you got the contain sorted out and things.
Yeah, exactly. You just have to use what you've got, and the whole identifying individual receivers and just numbering them. Like, even if like you say, you don't have a tall receiver, and you know you have to use somebody else, or you just use a normal, you know, like a regular receiver that doesn't happen to be 6'4" or whatever. Just identifying him by his jersey number for us is really important, because on the scout team they're always going to huddle before each play because they need to see the card. Um, and obviously, good offenses move their personnel around. So our guys will be in the huddle, and then they need to identify where their matchup is as they break the huddle. Like, it's not enough, for example, for one of our corners to stand on the right sideline, because his guy might come out of the huddle on the left sideline and never going to get there. So it's just an extra thing to say, right, okay, this is your matchup. This is who you got. This is who that player is going to be tonight. You just make sure, you know, wherever he is, you are.
Perfect, thank you. And this sort of leads me on to another question,
Yeah, yeah.
but I think you might have answered it already. But so, do you use sort of field and boundary cornerbacks, or do you tend to do
No,
matchups?
we don't. So we'll normally just play left and right, to be honest.
Okay,
We normally just play left and right, but it depends what we're running. So if we're going to run the zero stuff, then depending on our opponents, we'll play matchup. If we're going to run some of our base quarters stuff, or our too high kind of not cover zero stuff, then we'll play left and right. Um, and I mean, it's fairly obvious for an offense to identify what we're in, because, you know, one, we've got 7 players around the line of scrimmage in rush profiles, and then, you know, the other one, we've got apex defenders and backers at 5 yards. So I don't think we give anything away by moving the corner, you know, whether he's playing field or boundary or left and right, or if he's always on the right, now he's on the left. If we're playing a team that we don't think we need to match up, or we're happy that all of our corners will be kind of sound against all of their receivers, then we won't move people around. We'll just play left and right, and then the guys can play where they prefer to play, because not everyone wants to play in the slot, or some guys will only end up, not only, but they'll get the majority of the reps on the right side, and then if they want to play on the left, now you know, you kind of take them a little bit out of their comfort zone. So to keep guys more comfortable, which, you know, the more comfortable they are, the better they're going to play. They're going to be more relaxed. You know, we might just keep left and right or whatever, but yeah, generally we don't use field or boundary. I know a lot of teams do, but we don't necessarily set the strength by the field. So I don't know if that makes a difference, but yeah.
okay, yeah, and sort of so I you partly answered this already. How about concealing coverages? In maybe not necessarily now, but like in the past, do you like concealing the coverages, like starting in 2 high and rolling to 1 high?
We really don't play a lot of one high at all. We did a little bit in my first year at Lions, so we would run like a variation of like a 3 deep fire zone, or, you know, just a 3 deep coverage that we always start too high. But we didn't. I mean, we actually played your lot down there, and we got absolutely trounced. I think it was like 35-0 or 28-0. You'll remember in the rain, and
Yeah.
it didn't matter what coverage ran that day. You guys, I mean, the four receivers you had were just like absolutely gutting us. And you had Kyle, Timmy, and you had a couple of other guys, and it didn't matter what we were running. But we kind of took out a lot of the one high or a lot of the cover three stuff last year, because the more stuff we try and do, obviously, the less good we are at everything else. So
Yeah.
we didn't get enough kind of bang for your buck, I guess is the phrase, to justify keeping it in. So yeah, in terms of concealing coverage, we don't do it an awful lot. It's probably something we'll do more next year. A lot of the time, it depends on who we play, but a lot of the time, I'm just going to line up and we're just going to say, look, this is what we got. If you're good enough, come and beat us.
Okay.
There's definitely merits to concealing the coverage, of course. And I think we don't, with obviously playing lots of zero and lots of heavy blitz, that might be one of the reasons we don't necessarily get interceptions as much, because people know what we're running and we don't get the eyes on the QB. But the advantage of that is we get the sacks, we get the forced fumbles, and and the QB's getting hit most dropbacks. So yes, so we don't necessarily do it. We run a lot of quarter stuff, and I think with a lot of that stuff, we can be in different coverages from the same shell. So we're not necessarily concealing, but you wouldn't just be able to say, oh, this is what they're running or this is what we're running by our alignment. It might be two read, it might be like a standard cover four, it might be like a four read robber kind of element. So yeah, we don't necessarily line up to conceal, and we don't, like, our DBs do a little bit of like playing games before the snap, but we don't necessarily conceal the coverage. We just kind of run our stuff, and then we can run multiple coverages from the same look, but we don't. Yeah, the phrase conceal, I don't think we're not rolling to one high late. We're not dropping the nickel to a half or anything like that.
Sure.
We're pretty much going to line up the same most plays and play one or two or three things.
Yeah, it does take quite a lot of your time, because it's actually quite difficult. It might sound easy to sort of show two, roll to one, and that, but unless they get good at it, it's so blatantly obvious what they're going to do. It's like, well, I've just spent a lot of time doing something that the quarterback can see just by the body language of the defensive backs.
Yeah, exactly. We did a little bit where, because we play some cover one, so we always show a two high shell. So in that aspect, we're gonna play one, but it kind of looks like zero, or it might look like we're going to be too high. So it could be four, but and then whether that be, it depends on the formation. Like if certain formations allow us to do it a little bit better. If it's 2x2 and our safeties are over the slots and our strong outside linebacker is in an apex, we can play cover one pretty easy from that, because the Sam just needs to bump out a little bit. The Rovers takes a step down, so Rovers are weak side safety, and then our free just needs to roll to the middle. So we can do it. We just don't do it a huge amount.
Okay, good. And then sort of back to practices, like turnover circuits. Do you do those, or do you do that in the tackling period? Or?
Yeah, we don't do it in the tackling period. We keep that pretty much separate from everything else. We have a couple of we used to run it as circuits. We don't necessarily run it as a circuit anymore. We'll either have an 8-minute period and we'll run 2 drills, or if we do have a 16-minute period, then we may get into a circuit where we're kind of, I don't know, 6-ish minutes on each, something like that. But yeah, for us, turnover period, drills we're going to run a 2-man strip drill. So we'll have 2 defenders, 1 ball carrier. First ball carrier secures a tackle, second pins the elbow and rips the ball out, and then they recover it. And they'll kind of work in a pod. And if we can get enough footballs that we can get, this is where we kind of split it. So we'll have maybe one group working one thing, and then that group will work two-man strip, and so we might need, I don't know, eight footballs if we've got 8 footballs to do 24 people. We'll run a scoop and score. We'll run we run a tip drill. I'm not a huge fan of tip drills necessarily, because I just don't think it's ever that prevalent. It never seems to, like, I've never seen us tip a ball up and pick it off. But I know the guys love that kind of stuff, especially like the D linemen and the inside backers that never get to play catch, basically. So we'll use it just to kind of lighten the mood, and more of like a fun drill than we will in terms of like productive. And it gets our guys catching footballs, and hopefully if QB's making bad decisions, then our guys are going to need to catch footballs. So and then we'll do some sort of force fumble drill where it'll be in a pair and the player will be from behind, and then we'll either punch the ball out or rake it, depending on how the ball's being carried. But so we have done circuits, but we generally tend to split it into 2 groups, and then work in pods. And so it's not like one station to the next station to the next station. It's more, it's drill A or drill B, and then we swap over. So, I mean, it depends on your definition of a circuit, I guess.
Yeah. Don't really have one, but yeah, to just getting players to do different things at different times. Yeah, I'm glad you're very similar with me with tip drill. And like back in the day, I always wondered why people did so much of tip drill, and it's just like because the players love it, and it kind of gets a bit addictive to a coach. So, oh, the players are loving it, let's keep doing it, sort of thing. But yeah, let's focus on things that we might actually do in the game.
Yeah, we gave up 190 yards on the ground last week and we couldn't tackle, but the guys like tip drill, so if we just do that for another 5 minutes.
Yeah, get your priorities right.
Exactly.
So, just checking my notes for some more. So, just on the turnover section during sort of your sort of 7-on-7, if you do it on your team, do you talk about turnovers then? Do you try and force turnovers, or is that strictly?
I am absolutely like obsessed with preaching takeaways. We do call it turnovers. I try to use the phrase takeaway. It's only it's just wording, but it's like the takeaway is you're taking the ball away from them, and it's more of like an aggressive action. Turnover is what the statisticians write in the column, in the box score. A takeaway is we've taken the ball away from you. We pretty much, like at the start of the year, we go through our defensive goals. For us, we try and take the ball over 24 times minimum in the regular season. So we play 8 regular season games. That's obviously 3 turnovers a game. And for us, there is an absolute massive correlation between how many times we take the ball away and whether we win the game. In every game we took the ball away 3 times last year, we won the game. That's not to say when we didn't take the ball away 3 times, we lost. But in the games that we did lose, we didn't take the ball away 3 times. So that's possibly why we have such an aggressive, like why I call such an aggressive defense in terms of the cover zero, because if we can get, QBs that haven't had a lot of practice time, that, have not played the sport for very long, potentially, under pressure consistently, then they're going to make bad decisions. And, if it's not picks, then hopefully it's forced fumbles from sacks. But yeah, I mean, I wish our guys would try and punch the ball out more. As a standard, I think that's one thing that I watch college ball and I watch the NFL, and on every play, someone is trying to punch the ball out. So we may not necessarily do as good a job with that, but I mean, anytime we get a takeaway in practice, like we had this whole thing where whoever gets a takeaway goes and gives the ball to an offensive coach and they got to do 10 push-ups. Like we just, obviously there's various ways to celebrate takeaways, like the turnover chain. I think you guys had something, Hearts had something last year on the sideline where some sort of chain, and that was obviously big in college football with Miami and their turnover chain and whatever. But you everyone always says you get what you emphasize, and you know you'd love to be able to emphasize everything, but you can't. You've got to kind of pin your colors to the mast and set out on certain things. So for us, takeaways are like the main goal. I don't care if an offense has 500 yards on us. If we get 3 takeaways and that means we hold them to 20 points, we should be winning the game. Um, so yeah, I mean, maybe not necessarily in a team period, although we're doing it all the time. So our defensive mantra is hunt. It just kind of builds into the lion aspect. We've had that mantra now as we're going into our 3rd season. Our guys tend to buy into it, which is really good. And like anytime you get your guys brought in, then obviously it becomes a lot better. Anytime someone gets a takeaway, as well as the kind of the push-ups thing in practice, that person then gets to break down the huddle. You know, guys obviously love that, and you know the amount of energy. We're really blessed that we get a lot of guys that provide us a lot of energy, and the numbers on our roster probably help that as well. That we have a lot of people making a lot of noise. But like, I mean, if I was a defensive player for us, I would just want to be getting takeaways all the time, because the energy that generates, the praise that you get from coaches and teammates, like, so we kind of emphasize that hunt period all the time. And for us, hunting is going after the ball, you know, going after the ball carrier and forcing the takeaways.
Yeah, I mean that's when you see sort of teams with paid coaches, that's the big difference I see. Is like that they're on it all the time and yeah during that period. It's like get the ball, yeah, and
Yeah, and
yeah,
I'm one of those guys. Like I'm a bit like annoying to the offensive guys in practice. Like I'm always challenging them. I'm always trying to rile them up. But I'll be that guy who's running between drills and will just definitely just try and punch a football out from one of the offensive players' hands. Or we'll be in a scout period, and you know, or I don't know, like maybe a 7-on-7 equivalent, and the inside backers are down running inside run or you know pass rush, and I'll step in as an inside backer and I'll punch the ball out every play, because it's the other aspect, the ball security as well. Like the offense need to know, like, you can't afford to put this on the ground. So yeah, it's huge, and it's emphasized all the time. And all of the, like you say, the coaches that are paid, and every coach that comes over, especially the defensive coaches, there's always some mantra about it's all about the ball, or the ball is everything, or you know, yeah. So you're
yeah.
right.
And that, I mean, that'd be a tip for a new coach from me. If you want to make an impact, if you're trying to get a job at somewhere, you know, it doesn't take any skill to run around and saying to the players, you know, don't forget to punch the ball out. You know.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I um I don't want to take up too much of your time. That's most of my questions now. So
No,
thank you for that.
no, no problems.
I don't know if you've had any questions or you want to.
I mean, so you're obviously like a one high from watching your defense. You're a one high guy, and I think a lot of that probably comes from the cover three stuff, from the Seahawks influence that has on you. Um, what are your merits of like one high 8-man front, and like how deep do you go in terms of when you're teaching three? Are you teaching like rip liz? Are you teaching pattern match, or are you just teaching spot drop?
Yeah, so we had a few. So mostly Rip and Liz. So like what so yeah, obviously Coach Collins is my influence, and he's sort of like the strength is the middle of the field. You're really strong in that center in the run game and the pass game, sort of thing. And then it adapts to the formation. So yeah, if we see sort of two back teams, you know, you're kind of almost rubbing your hands because it plays into, yeah, do have trouble with spread, which is why I do some 2-man stuff as well, 2 high stuff, because a good spread team is always going to challenge a middle. Yeah,
Yeah, that's why we're. I mean, we're too high a lot of the time, and Yeah, I think it's a challenge being able to both play the run from too high, and it's a kind of battle I always have in my head where I look at like the Warriors, and the Warriors for years and years would just line up in one high and play 1 or 3 and just kick teams butts basically the whole game. And yeah, it's definite. One of the things I always kind of harp on at is the inability of the British game to throw the ball, particularly in uni ball, because of the constraints you have with time. So obviously, therefore, stopping the run is paramount. And for us, it might be using a heavy box and playing zero. For you guys, if it's running, cover 3 with an 8-man box and a safety playing the alley, 9-man box, you can argue. And so, yeah, it's kind of a bit of a philosophical question I've got in my head about how we need to be defending teams. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, I know.
and I mean, it is. It's a challenge. You'd love to have 12 players, wouldn't you? Yeah, that's the whole thing about football. But
Yeah,
yeah, it really is. And I mean, I'm a big proponent into, you could say, well, we can play cover 3 because teams can't throw it further than 20 yards. But I'm a big proponent in preparing for the teams that you'll play late in the season. It's no good just
yeah,
having a scheme that will beat most teams. You need a scheme that will beat every team. So yeah, that's the difficulty. But yeah, we almost sort of converted into a sort of 4-2-5 when we were playing spread, and then it would go back into pretty much a 4-4 cover 3 when you're playing 2 bats and a tight end, sort of 21 personnel. So I mean
where
that's
are you, where are you lining up your kind of, I'm assuming Apex players. Where do you guys line those up against 2 by 2? Are they Apex? Are they inside of the two? And how are they? Are they outside leverage? I know some
yeah.
people outside leverage on the slot.
Really, it depends on. So we sort of have the divider rules. So it depends on the divider rules. So if they're tight, they're outside leverage. If they're wide, they're inside leverage. So just yeah, it's all about the leverage of the players and getting eye. Yeah, it was interesting that you were saying about you don't get many interceptions because you don't have eyes. You mostly zero a man. Yeah,
Yeah,
the converse of that is this what they call it, the 99.9 defense, where your eyes on the quarterback 99.9% of the time. And yeah, there's pros and cons to everything, which is why we love the game. But
yeah,
yeah, and I do, the challenge is understanding it and being clear on what you're trying to achieve and not mixing up the philosophies, because then I think you just become a bit of everything and you're not really sure what you're doing.
yeah. No, that's a good point, and I think having that clearly kind of there's no right way, but doing it one way, and having a kind of a good rationale and understanding as to why you do certain things a certain way. There's always going to be strengths and weaknesses. Like you said, you'd love to have 12 on the field, but as long as your guys understand, yeah, this is this is us, this is what we do, this is what we're about. Yes, we can be beaten by this, and this, but you've got to do something. You can't. I think one of the kind of big mistakes you kind of see from young defensive coaches is they want to do everything. They want to run, we're going to run cover 3 on first down. We're going to run cover 2 on second down. We're going to run 2-man. We're going to run 3 fire zone. We're going to run cloud, and you know, and I think a lot of defense is just having one base defense that can align to everything. And as long as you can fit the run and everyone knows the coverage rules, like against 50% of the teams in this country, if you do those things, you're going to win.
Exactly. And yeah, it was a real eye opener to me when we were talking to a brand new coach at the convention about defense, and it's just like, where do you start? It's so complicated, and
Oh,
we're just like, that's just one alignment and one coverage, and it's
yeah,
took me like 2 hours to explain all the. So how people can have two matches beyond me? It's just like they're not
yeah,
they're not doing the adjustments or the what if you have too much. So like yourselves, like we'd try and stick with a, a base with a few adjustments, and then adjust to formations, and then you're pretty solid. But yeah, you got to get all those fundamentals in. Then you got to teach the techniques. It's just
Exactly. We talk about how much time we got for tackling. Well, if you can spend half an hour on install, and you've got to lose something from somewhere, haven't you? And I mean, even at Birmingham, like when I was at Gloucester, we would run one defense with all the rules, and it's basically two high quarter stuff. It's a lot of what I do now with an underfront. We pretty much against some teams, because we were only in Division Two. We didn't, as coaches, we didn't need to be there. We could run our base defense every play, and the coaches could have gone for a drink at the pub, and we would have been okay because our guys were better getting off blocks. They knew how to line up. They knew what the coverage rules were. And so we didn't need to be there. But then I got to Birmingham, and my first year at Birmingham, I was just absolutely amazed by how much the guys could take in. Like, I mean, okay, it is an academic university. Like, most people there are getting AAB or some kind of variation of that at A level, or triple distinction at BTEC. So, even that side of it, they're still getting the top of what they need. But I was absolutely amazed by how much our guys could take in, because I've always had a bit of an install schedule, and I've done it at Bristol with the Aztecs, and I did it at Gloucester, and then all of a sudden we got to like 3/4 of the way through pre-season, and I had everything in, and I'm like, how is this even possible? And so I've kind of we do add, but we don't want to add loads of different stuff. So what I try to do is just add it like layers. So we'll have all of our base stuff in, all of our base rules that we use game to game, and in practice for all of pre-season, and then we'll still work our cover zero stuff and build from there. And then what we tend to do is we tend to almost have a game plan week to week. So if we're against, I don't know, team A, then it might be right, we're just going to run base defense all week because they want to run spread, and they want to run spread inside zone, outside zone, and we think we can match up to that pretty well on our base. If they want to run, I don't know, flex bone, then we need to still probably going to run a variation of base, but we would have a specific game plan, certain calls that we teach in the week. And but I was just amazed by how much our guys could actually pick up. And something that Maxwell, who obviously I know you speak to, who's our DCH student, said to me, he said, like, these guys will pick up more than you can expect. And I was like, well, how much are they really going to pick up? And they really did pick up more. So,
which is nice because it challenges you to learn more, to pass it on, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And you get like the difference in classroom settings from what I've worked for previously to what I have now. Like, most of those guys are at a uni like that because they kind of got some academic interest, or they've got strength there and they've got like a confidence there. So classroom sessions, nobody ever gets the hundreds and hundreds of questions, but we get some like really good questions from some of our guys. Like, there's a couple of our linebackers who might not necessarily be our starters, but like, they could coach for me. Like, they know so much, and they ask really, really good questions all the time. And like, back end of the last year, the very start of the year, we had about a half an hour discussion on the merits of boxing versus spill defense. And like, we went through both. Like, it was only one of our guys who was saying, why don't we box like this? And I was like, well, we could box it, and it's fundamentally sound, and yes, you can do it, but we're a spill team. And so they only kind of go through why you're a spill, and you've got rookies in the classroom, and you're trying not to like let their eyes glaze over. But then equally, you don't want to stifle the guy at the back who's asking why we shouldn't box counter versus spill, or and it's like, well, I don't think I've ever had a coach ask why we don't play box, let alone spill, let alone a third year or fourth year safety.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, great. I mean, going back to I've sort of changed my philosophy. I used to be that real control freak. I'm going to call this play and you're going to run it, sort of thing. But now a lot of the adjustments are just on the field. A lot of the time, they checks and coverage. I mean, it does worry me because if somebody doesn't get the call and somebody calls it, then you get but it just frees up the players and they think a lot more, um, and take ownership a bit more, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like we all of our stuff pretty much is rules based. So like I rarely call a coverage. I might call a coverage if we want to run a separate coverage on a certain down and distance or based on scout. But like our guys call it on the field based on what they see, and I've done that everywhere I've been, and I've never had a problem. And like you say, once you get the ownership from the players, oh, actually, this is what we're going to do here. Okay, the receivers have gone into a tight split. Let's do this instead. Or yeah, the players want to be in control of that, and you get more buy-in, and therefore you get better results, like you said.
Perfect. Well, that's a whiteboard talk that we can do another time, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely, definitely.
Right. Thanks, Coach Wilford. I think I've taken up enough of your time, and
No worries. I'm going
that
to have a bit last night now. Anyway, so.
feels that. So, thank you very much.